Hi everybody, my name is Lewis and this is Traditional Black Powder. Today we're going to talk about powders.
Okay, so let's take a look at black powder and Pyrodex, what they're commonly used for, the different grades of black powder, and best uses for them. So we have different grades of black powder, the most common being probably the middle three, you know. FG can be used for musket shotguns and large caliber rifles, and also for cartridge and cannon. 2FG is commonly used for muskets, shotguns, and rifles, and calibers that are 50 and up. Probably anywhere from 50 to 70 or 75 caliber, somewhere around there. Probably used the most used there, the FFG. And then there's 3FG for rifles that are 50 caliber and smaller, and pistols and revolvers. This is the powder that I use the most, or actually that's the only thing that I used for my rifles other than priming powder, because most of my rifles are 50 caliber and under, and I can use this powder for all of them. And then we have the fourth one, 4FG, which is basically a priming powder for flintlocks, and I use that also and for my flintlocks, and it's worked great. Some people say that it's not needed, and I agree, it's not needed, but if you have it available to you and you want to use it, it'd be great. If you don't, you can get away with using 3FG and using that for priming the pan. And if you're using in larger calibers, you can use 2FG. So it's not necessary to have the priming powder, but for me, I enjoy having it. It works great. I've never had a problem with it. But like I said, if it came down to a point where it just wasn't available, I couldn't get it, or I didn't want to spend the extra money to use it or get it, then I would have no problem using 3FG. Now we have Pyrodex. Pyrodex is a substitute for black powder. It basically comes in two flavors. You have Pyrodex RS, which can be used in all calibers of percussion muzzle loading rifles and shotguns, and mostly used in large calibers because it's comparable to 2FG in black powder, and 2FG, as you saw on the other slide, that is mostly used in large caliber muzzle loaders. There's also Pyrodex P, which is used in pistols and smaller bore rifles like 45 caliber and under. So that's also a pretty versatile powder to use if you're using percussion rifles. It's equivalent to 3F in black powder, and therefore it's pretty similar in what we talked about on the other slide with 3FG and using 50 and under for calibers. Now, the difference between black powder and Pyrodex is that black powder is considered an explosive. Black powder is not easily available through commercial stores, local brick and mortar stores. Because it's considered an explosive, you'll find that most local places in your town, don't have it. I've looked around when I was first trying to find it, and nobody would carry it anywhere. And as it turns out, because it's considered an explosive, it has to follow certain regulations to be able to store the powder. And most brick and mortar stores don't have those facilities to properly, follow the guidelines of storing an explosive. And you find that it's going to be very hard to find a black powder in a local store for purposes of using it for flintlocks. Basically, you're probably going to wind up having to go to an online source, and there's a few of them, and they're all good. But the problem is that, well, not a problem, but it's a hassle to have to get it from on the internet, because since it is an explosive, when it gets shipped to you, you're going to have to pay a hazmat charge, and the hazmat charge is expensive. Most of the time, if you're going to wind up getting, and I don't even know if that they will do it, but if you're going to wind up getting just 1 or 2 pounds, the charge could be almost as much as what you're getting. So for most people that wind up getting powder online, they wind up getting it in bulk. So the $25 is not such a burden, or at least it makes a little sense. You'll find that most clubs will wind up pooling together and wind up getting powder that way. It just makes more sense and a little bit more economical on the hazmat charge. As far as Pyrodex is concerned, since it is a propellant, it doesn't have the restrictions of storing as it does with black powder, so it's not a problem. You can probably walk into any sporting goods stores that carries firearms and find Pyrodex. It's easily available. No hazmat charges or anything. It's obviously you wind up saving money, but the issue is that it doesn't work well with flintlocks. So if you're shooting a flintlock, you're pretty much have to go over and try to purchase some black powder. So we come to this particular slide where the difference between flintlocks and percussions and what they need. For flintlocks, I would recommend you stick with black powder, because Pyrodex, when you try to ignite it, it takes a hotter spark than what a flint can provide to get it to go off reliably. Black powder with just a spark of flint, it will set that powder pan off. Whereas Pyrodex, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, and it just becomes unreliable and frustrating. So if I'm using a flintlock, I would shy away from using Pyrodex. Now, if you're using a percussion rifle, the caps that it uses to ignite the main charge are pretty hot. So there's no problem with Pyrodex going off on a percussion rifle. And so if you're using a percussion rifle, you have it made as far as getting powder easily and at a lower cost. It just I guess depends on what you like to shoot. For me, I love flintlocks, and I'll put up with the extra cost and hassle to get powder available to me. So anyways, this is just a basic overview of what you need to use, and the different types of grades of powder. So if you're a beginner and you're just getting started and you didn't know what the different grades are for, or what you should use depending on what you have, I hope that this helped you out a little bit, so you can, when you get started, you know exactly what you need, and you won't wind up wasting money on getting something that you can't use. So thanks for joining me, and hopefully this worked out and you got a little information out of it. And until next time, keep the tradition alive.